Hello everyone, this is the March 2020 Lockheed Vega update. Kermit Weeks is Lockheed Vega that was built in 1929, so it's 91 years old now, and we're working on bringing it back to life. A couple years ago we restored the wing, ready for fabric, tails ready for fabric. We started on the fuselage, found out the fuselage was in a little bit rougher shape than we first thought and hoped. Wasn't as nice as the wing, and primarily it's because the airplane was wrecked a number of times throughout its life. It's had a tough life, and it's been patched and repaired a bunch of times. So when we look at the structure that we have inside the fuselage, you can see, the reasoning why we needed to replace quite a bit of the wood. Almost all the wood will be replaced. When we look at the structure that we have inside the fuselage, you can see, the reasoning why we needed to replace quite a bit of the wood. Almost all the wood will be replaced. So if you look over here at the skins, you can see some really rough areas where it's been patched. This is a piece of birch plywood that was put on instead of the proper spruce skin somewhere along the way. Here's some original skin right in this area, then a patch right here. Another patch here, and we'd kind of hoped that we could take the skins off, the structure would be pretty good, and then we could just replace the skins, touch up the structure, do a couple repairs, and then be able to replace the skin. Didn't work out that way. Once we got it opened up, we could see there were a lot of problems. Because of the damage it's had over the years, a lot of the structural members, these diaphragms, have been repaired. Some of these, like this one you see down in the bottom here, is you've got a lot of water damage. The skin was rotten down there in the bottom as well. But when you look at this actual piece, the entire thing, it's about 2 inches wide, and this particular one should be about 3/4 of an inch wide. So it's been repaired a bunch of times and had extra pieces added onto it. Some of these are in okay shape. We may be able to use some of those. The metal fittings and hardware that are inside, we'll clean, inspect, and reuse all that. The airplane has had so many different lives. At one time it was a camera survey airplane, so it had a large hole cut in the bottom, and then some structural changes that were done to reroute the cables a different way around instead of in the belly, around the side of the fuselage. So all that has to go back to be the original method of doing it. You can see some other added in pieces on the sides of frame members, just call it sistering when you sister one on the side of it, just to double it up and make repairs. Then some of the primary frame members, like this, which is number 6, this is where the rear spar of the wing attaches, and you can see how it's been repaired. The bottom of it being scarfed in, stagger stepped in on gluing in layers. And then somewhere along in its life, when this frame was replaced, it was replaced with wood of alternating species, which I think is probably mahogany and spruce, but according to the drawing it should be all spruce all the way through. So that is something that we found that was inconsistent with the drawings. Some of these heavier members, heavier beams are in good shape. We'll be able to reuse that stuff on the airplane. Much of the stuff that was in the floor is not so good. As you can see here, this is the actual cockpit. This is the command center here. And just to be clear, the fuselage is laying on its side right now. This is the top of the airplane where the wing would sit. So we've got it rolled over on its side. Half of the skin removed, half of the skin is still on. So we did that so we can actually get inside, see the structure, and understand everything. So you can see just there's a lot of age and decay and just not so nice on a lot of these pieces. And that's why we have to go through and check everything, make sure we can reuse it. If we can reuse it, awesome. And if it's not good enough to use, then we will make new. So we've made tooling to be able to make everything that we need to replace and do it that way. So when as I said earlier, when we started into the project, we were hoping that the structure would be good, and we would just have to make new skins. So we knew that kind of going in, we were going to make new skins. So we knew there would be tooling involved, making a mold to make new skins, making the skins themselves, the materials and everything. So what we've added into the project, or became necessary, was to make some of the structure as well. So the thing's going to be, you know, top drawer, A1 shape when it's done, fully airworthy, ready to fly. So and it'll be flown, which will be really cool. So to move over and talk about the skins themselves, that's quite a process. A lot of people, there's a lot of documentation out there that the factory used a huge multi-ton concrete mold, a female mold, and then they put the layers of spruce in that, a big huge airbag bladder to press the layers of skin and glue together to make the 4mm thick skin. That was one half the fuselage, a left or a right half. One mold, there was only one mold, and one mold made both sides. It's symmetrical, so you make two of the same part, and depending on which side of the airplane you glue it on is when it becomes a left or a right, and where you cut the holes for the windows and the door. So it's not two molds where you have to make a left and a right mold like a mosquito where it needs two halves. But this is just one mold, make two parts, which is nice. The factory was going into production of building these airplanes. They built 250 or 300 of these different variations of Vegas and Sirius and all the different wooden Lockheeds. So it made sense for those guys to have a production concrete mold, some other uses for the male fixtures and things that were used to create the mold. They used those to keep production going. They were doing, 35 or so of these things a year. That's a lot of airplanes. Here we're restoring one. So to go through the exercise of building the concrete mold takes a lot of time, a lot of money, and then we have this 20-ton thing that we have to figure out something to do with it. So we opted to bring a little modern technique in that wasn't invented in 1929, and that's vacuum bagging. So we vacuum bagged, instead of pressure with a bag of 15 psi in that big rubber bladder to press it into a female, we've taken the multiple layers of spruce that would go on the mold, and we are vacuum bagging it on this mold, on the male mold. So this was made to the inside skin size, instead of their concrete mold was made to the exterior dimension of the skin. The skin is less than 3/16 of an inch thick. Like I said, it's 4mm when you add it up. It's a 40 thousandths, an 80 thousandths, and a 40 thousandths layer, 3-ply skin that's put together. So it's not very thick, but we accounted for that thickness when we built the mold. But we cut out the D-shaped bulkheads that gave the shape of this mold, and then we have these hemlock sticks on here that nest together, and then we glued all those on, sanded and finished it out, and so this became the male plug to be able to make the skin. We're able to use this mold to produce the pieces that make up the skin, and to explain that, the interior surface of the skin is a 1mm thick piece, and there are 14 strips of spruce that are 22 feet long that run parallel to each other and butt together like this on the mold, nose to tail, and that's the inside layer. Then the middle layer, which is just the cross fill, is 2mm thick, or 80 thousandths, and it's a bunch of 3.5-inch wide strips that are butted together in this direction. 70 strips to be exact, from nose to tail. Those make up the mid layer, which is just the core. Then the outer layer is once again the 14 long strips that run the full length of the fuselage, and they're held together with the veneering tape and put on the outside. So that's the way the original was made. Same number of pieces, same thicknesses, everything. It's just that we're assembling them over the top of this piece that we would have had to make a concrete mold. We're just going to use it and going on the outside instead. And that makes it one less thing we have to make, and we can go right to it. We've, as I said, we use this to be able to develop the shapes and fit up all the skins. And right here on the floor, we can see these are the 7 unique shapes of those long planks. Now each one of these is 40 thousandths of an inch thick. You can see it's quite thin. It's very much like paper. It's pretty fragile. And that's the inner and the outer layers. The mid layer, which runs crossways, is twice as thick. It's like the equivalent of 2 of these. So a little bit stiffer. The beauty of the fuselage being symmetrical is that we have 7 patterns, and we use 2 number 1s, then 2 number 2s, number 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7 down the side of the fuselage. So we didn't have to make 14 unique patterns. We made these, and we cut out enough to have a full set plus a spare, and that was an earlier step in making a skin. So those are then placed on the mold where they belong on the mold, and it held together with veneering tape and to make that layer of the shell. Then it's removed, and then make the next piece, and so on. So the first one that we assembled is the outer layer. We assemble it here on the mold, then we take it off and store it on a rack. Then we make the middle layer, and we take it off and store it on a rack. And then we make the inner layer. It stays on the mold. Then the middle layer comes on with glue, bonds to the first layer, and then the outer layer bonds to the mid layer, and you end up with the 3 plies. We did the vacuum bagging in 2 steps. We did the inner and middle so that we had time to be able to get it all glued up and not have the glue start to dry on us. We are in Florida, it's a little bit warm, so we need to watch our glue times. So we did it in 2 steps. We vacuum bagged the first 2 layers together, then clean that up, vacuum bag the 3rd layer back on top. That's how we do it.
Okay.
We have one of the 2 skin shells made. This is the first of the 2 skin shells. So it's in this storage cradle that we have here, where we can take and flip that. We built this cradle off of the mold and made it fit everything. So the skin is sitting here ready to go. And it's the 4 millimeters thick, like we talked about. And we can kind of see some staggering here. We can see the plies. Here's the outer skin, and then the middle skin, and then there's the inner one there. So it's not super thick, but that's the majority of the skin is that thickness. And there are a few places where the primary structure is on there. It gets another 3 layers on the inside, about a foot wide, and a few places where there's a doubler that goes in. That'll be bonded in before it goes on the structure. It's really pretty tough. It's really pretty strong. And obviously once it gets fully assembled and bonded to the structure, it's very, very rigid. I just wanted to talk about a few of the things that were kind of surprises, that you don't really expect when you're doing something like this, and you kind of learn as you go. One is the effects of humidity change and temperature change on the wooden pieces before they are assembled into the skin. Once they're glued together, they become far more stable. It was really interesting that these strips that you see here on the inside that are long ways, and the ones that are on the outside, would change in width this direction, each strip, on a humid morning, and then as you get into after lunch, they change shape again. So if you had all this mounted up on the mold and you're working with it, and you come in from overnight, all of these were humped up on the mold. It was all too big. And then after lunch, everything was laying flat again. So it was constantly changing with the moisture. The wood's so thin, the moisture really seems to affect the dimension quite a bit. On the ones that, the mid layer, the core that runs this way, they're thicker, but across that 22-foot length of the fuselage, came in one day, and it was a ½ inch shorter than it was when I went home. So it was like, wow, this is really changing a lot. So what that showed us is that, one, you didn't want to clamp down any one of those strips too hard, because then it's going to split or fight itself trying to get and move and grow. So we needed to let them float with each other and expand naturally as the conditions changed. So we learned that. We also learned that we need to leave it a little bit long and trim it at the last possible minute so that we have the length that we needed to reach the edge. Otherwise, you could end up short. If this was designed for everything to be trimmed 2 inches away from all the edges of the mold, and that still leaves us an inch of extra material. So the goal was to make sure that we didn't end up with barely enough. We want to have, when we go to fit it to the structure, we want to have at least an inch of extra material all the way around. We have that here. It's a little bit more than an inch, so we're good to go. But now that it's a full skin, it's far more stable. So in the skin building, we're ready to start on building the second half, and that's going to be the strips that we saw on the floor, and then cut and fit the core stuff. It takes a few man hours there to get all that assembled, and then and ready to go, and then takes about week, 6 days cycle time to glue it all up once we have the 3 layers ready to go. To glue up the first 2, bag it, clean all that up, prepare everything for the next round, and then go ahead and do the second round and get to this point here. So this was day before yesterday. We glued up the outside onto this, and a week ago we did the first glue up. So it went pretty quick. All right, just want to give you a little update on taping all the veneer strips together. This is the planks that are cut out that look like this over here turned into a set for the skin. These all have to we had to cut, fit them as we've talked about before, and then now they get held together with veneer tape. So I just wanted to go over a little bit of the steps that are involved in doing that, as far as how we fit them up, what are we doing, checking what kind of fit are we looking for, and then applying the tape so you can see how that's done. It's a little bit tedious, takes a little bit of time, but in the end you get a nice fit. So what we're looking for is as this piece and this piece are both cut out according to a pattern that we made based off the shape of the airplane. And the idea is to have these fit together with as tight a gap as we can, or 0 gap if we can. And so our patterns are pretty good. Takes a little bit of adjusting now and then to get the fit just right. So what we may do is, if we had a spot that was a little bit long, I just use a small little hand plane and shave the edge of the wood just a little bit, get the fit together, and then it's on over the male mold in the shape and the position where we want it. And you can see we've already got some of them taped together here, and we'll go ahead and get some tape on this row here so you can see how that's done. Just so you know, the veneer itself is about 40 thousandths of an inch thick. It's pretty thin. The inner layer is this, and there's a mid layer that'll go across, and then another layer on the outside. Make a 3-ply skin plywood. That'll be on there. What we're using to hold it together is veneer tape, which is a very thin, it's 2/1000ths of an inch thick paper tape, and it has a water activated adhesive on it. So what we end up doing is got a little rig set up here that moistens the tape, got a roller, and then this pulls off, it rolls across there, gets it wet, the underside is nice and wet, and then we apply it onto the structure. drop my roller. Roll it on. It sticks right to the wood. Roll it on nice and tight. And when it's damp like this, it's a little bit expanded. And as it dries, it'll actually tighten up a little bit, help pull the joint together. So what we can do to make good progress is then take the model iron it. It helps dry the tape out a little bit. Press it down, glue it on good. And then there's a joint. And then just continue on down the length of the fuselage in both directions and get it all on there. Once these last two runs on this shell are taped together, this will be the second set of these that we've done. We've got one here sitting on the old fuselage. That's the first one. And then we have two more of these to make for the outer. So these are the two inners, a left and a right inner layer of the plywood. Then there'll be the mid layer that'll be glued over the top of this, and then the outer layer over the top of that. And that makes the shell. That's it.